Thank you so much, everyone. We're back again. Looking forward to this amazing panel discussion that we're going to run right now. But we wanted to talk about growth and the seed of growth, really. Where does that come from? What are some factors that we can touch on today that will enable you to look at your life and business by growing. So growth has a lot of meaning, but I'll touch on a little bit of that with the panel discussion that we're going to have. But I wanted to do this intro quickly. So the ability to cope and rise with to the inevitable challenges and problems that we have in business really lies in the heart of what well-being and that mindset comes from. So this is why we have this panel discussion. I've got Dr. M. Zuschmann, yes, hey, got it right, which is excellent. And I've got Karen Lebsanft from Karajan Kitchen as well. And I've got Phil Preston. So I'm going to read a little bit about their background so that you guys are aware of who they are. So Dr. Maria Zuschmann, Dr. M is, as she is affectionately known, has a passion for helping community and to feel and function better in all aspects of their lives, and she helps them identify and remove interferences that are holding them back. So she is an integrative chiropractor, podcaster, speaker, facilitator, stress adaptation, and performance coach. Welcome, Dr. M. Thanks. And we've got Phil. Phil Preston, in his early work, was compelled to bring business and community interests together. So he found that individuals and businesses and organizations, they work with and can contribute something great, and his purpose to help them realize this potential. So really trying to realize the potential of building purpose within organization. Thank you, Phil. And Karen is the CEO and founder of Karajan Kitchen, Lavosh, a famous Australian brand. So if you love your cheese, I love my cheese. It's one of the best things to have from Karen. And basically raised in the inner city of the Housing Commission by her grandmother. Karen built this amazing small business from scratch. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much.
See you.
Excellent. Karen, I might start with you because you've got a really interesting story, so I want to touch on that. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and share, what contribution, in building that resilience that you had in business and where you came from?
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, I think if I go back to my very early days, of course, I was born in a city and brought up in public housing in Sydney. And from there, I actually lost my dad when I was very young. He suicided when I was a very young age. And then from there, I was a twin. I became and then one of three, but having been very supportive of and caring for my children. My siblings. And I was always the tallest of the three, so I became the carer of the three.
Yeah.
From there, I actually moved from Housing Commission year 10, went through to year 10. I really wanted to be a maths teacher, okay? And that didn't actually happen because my mum couldn't afford to put me through to year 12. Yeah. And so she decided that if I didn't get a job at the end of the school holidays in year 10, I could go back through to year 12. But of course, she had a job for me 3 days out of year 10. So the rest of that is where I went. And then rolled on into early marriage, ended up early divorce, ended up into a few years of independence. And then around about 1990, Ben, my husband, business partner, came along, and by 93 we had started a business known as Karajan Kitchen Lavosh. So 28 years on, having had an idea, we now built that Australian brand.
Oh, fantastic. Maria actually has an amazing point around this in terms of the fitting in part, because Karen started off with an amazing story around touching on that. So why do you think trying to fit in versus fitting out creates a stress response and can make us can make us sick. Sorry.
It's a great question, Ian, but I think a lot of us are taught from very early on to try and fit in and fly under the radar. And there are three things that create stress within our system: chemical stress, emotional stress, or physical stress. And when we're trying to fly under the radar, that can set all three off. And so by actually leaning into exactly who we are, whether that's a unique idea, which I love your products, by the way, I've eaten truckloads of it, is that by leaning into the idea that's unique to us, it actually means that we can live our true life to our true values, as we were speaking a little earlier. And it means that instead of actually creating a stress response within our system, we're actually able to create more energy for the stuff that we love to do.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is where I think, obviously, Karen, your resilience, you can tell you've been through a fair bit there. And one of the things, that Carriage on Kitchen, with the history that the Australian brand, really quite prominent out in the market. But there would have been a lot of factors to create a brand like that as a small business. And, a business gets stronger through resilience. Everybody says that.
Yes.
But I want to hear a little bit about the specific experiences that you went through that created that resilience for you.
Absolutely. If I think of, in 93, we started Courage on Kitchen Lavosh, and it was an idea and it rolled from there, and we started selling 30 packets a week. And when it suddenly had legs, so to speak, and we were selling those to a Sydney distributor, and we would go along and sell our 30 packets per week. Great start, thinking we got $30 back then for our 30 packets a week. We went and had a good old Chinese feed in Chinatown in Sydney before we filled the van up and headed back up the mountain to actually keep the restaurant going for the 6 days of operations. So that became a little bit of relief almost, a little bit of an outing away from building the business. So when you think of work-life balance, I suppose that was the work-life balance. We rolled into, from the 30 packets a week, we now produce 756,000 pieces a day, which is an amazing, but we started very small, and we've had a journey of challenges, and success doesn't look like this, a straight line. It's up, down, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, in, out, personalities that come into that, personal issues. So if I take you back to 93, by 1997, we had a defining moment in our business. We took a stand at Fine Food Show and decided if we were going to build the business or not build the business.
Excellent.
Coles supermarket manager came along and said, love your product, your packaging won't work, gave us a listing in Coles, and it's why we sit in Australian pantries today. Absolutely. But then came the hard work. We thought that was great, but then came the hard work. By 2004, we were 6 years on the shelf. Well-known brand, the biscuits that you eat from every other Australian brand, Arnott's, came along and decided they wanted to come out with a competitive lavash. And what they did was they priced higher than us. And they actually said, by pricing higher, they really went, we're better than you and we'll take your market. So what we had to do was think outside the square. And as a family business, we've put 6 years of, sweat, tears, everything into it, your entire life, as businesses do, it's small business. And we thought, we are dead in the water. That was it. So we reached out differently, put a little note inside our packets, spoke to our consumer, and it was a David and Goliath battle. And we didn't name the company. I can now because we're still here. But we didn't then name the company. And our buyer in the supermarket tells us we outsold that brand 2-1 and we stayed on the shelf. Yeah. So there is, the challenge that brought actually was, in fact, we went through fear. We went through absolutely, my goodness, we're going to lose everything. Where do we go? But we dug deeper. That was 93 to 2004. Come into 2012, we nearly lost the business hook, line and sinker, I say.
Wow.
And that's 19 years in business. You think you're doing great, 20 years in, you're nearly 20 years. And it was just some silly things we didn't see. We didn't see the writing on the wall. There were certain things. We were naive still in the business. Yep. One thing I talk about in business, we had to dig deep, because I talk about, and we've had this conversation, Dr. M, is that get your ego out of your business, because I think we were in love with being in love with the business and that type of thing. So your business is an entity. But where it took us by having our ego in the business, we did nearly lose, I always say, the house, the business, the kids, the cars, the grass, the soccer ball, the dogs, the whole lot. And I can jest about it now, but it wasn't then. It was, it was incredibly difficult, to the point that we're living a life, and a nice life. Yeah. And then suddenly my wage went down to $20 a week to survive.
Oh, wow. So
that's pretty hard.
I want to touch on that, because you actually bring up a really good point, because from what I can see is that you found your own purpose clear through Carriage On Kitchen, because you wouldn't be fighting like that. And, Phil, I really want to touch on, first off, how come purpose has become your thing? Do you know what I mean? I believe your message is really clear around getting organizations to be a purpose. And what do you see in Karen's, characteristics that maybe come across around the purpose touch?
Some instant analysis. I'll spare you that. So
do that off camera, Phil.
apart from being born and bred in Hobart, Tasmania, which at the time some people thought of as social disadvantage, it's now quite trendy. I ended up in a corporate role, and I was analysing companies' financials and seeing what they were doing. I got really frustrated with poor corporate behaviours, and also that companies were just giving to charity and doing things just to protect brand and reputation. And I knew then that if they're really going to change the world in a way that we need them to, then you've got to connect it to their bottom line. So I got interested in that. From a personal perspective, I thought after 17 years, why? Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? Do I want to stay here for the rest of my working life? And I said no. So I exited the industry then and made a commitment to investigating this connection between profit and purpose. And I think we'll come on to it soon. There's some telltale traits in there, I'm sure, but we'll come into maybe some of the things you look at when you go through that transformation.
Yeah, excellent. So in terms of, can I just go back to the audience, and there's slido.com, please jump on slido.com. So if you guys want to ask any of our panelists any questions at all, please send that through. We'd love to see them on board. But I wanted to touch on, I guess, some three key performing sort of, at your best every day. So I guess, Dr. M, you analyze this, you've worked on this really well. So, people talk about, a lot of people talk about resilience, but really they don't know what resilience is until they are in it. So none of us do, because we've heard stories of people learning things the hard way. I definitely, am the school of the hard knocks. That's what I call it. But resilience comes from that. But if you can give us three characteristics that you define, every day that has you performing at your best, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. I think when you're going through tough times and you've got the house, the kids, the soccer ball, and any other sporting piece of equipment that you had on the line back then, Karen, is when you're really under the pump, you need to have your foundations in place. So the three key areas that I look at every day in my action steps I'm taking is, number one, my prime real estate of the day, which I consider to be the first half hour to hour of your day. Are you starting your day consciously, or are you starting your day unconsciously? When the alarm goes off, are you rehearsing your day? Are you planning the best day possible? Or are you already got the shits because you're thinking that the traffic's going to be bad, you've got a bad day ahead at work, and you're expecting everything to go wrong versus hoping and planning for everything to go right? That would be the first step. The second step, I would say, is being aware of your connectedness through the day. Who are you actually connecting with? How are you connecting? Are you connecting with people in real life, or are you actually connecting completely virtually in all the wrong places? That makes a massive difference, because it allows us to manage our time and our energy better, and also the things throughout our day that we are actually in control of. A lot of people start that day when you're starting your day unconsciously, and you're already thinking about all the things outside of your control throughout the day. I'm sure we've all done that, right? Where we start off thinking about, oh my God, we've got that thing we've got to get done at work. It's actually outside of my control, but I'm going to spend the first few hours of my day worrying about it. So what starts off as a relatively small problem ends up being a massive problem before you've even got to work, and you can't actually do anything about it in the first place. So being really aware about what within your day you have control over, what you don't have control over, and if there's stuff that you're not sure about, is making sure you've got a great coach, a great mentor, mentor, a great colleague that can actually point you in the right direction to simplify your day.
Yeah, excellent. As small business owners, we try to separate our business from our lives, but the truth is, it doesn't happen most of the time. And that's what Growth Gen is really all about. We wanted to combine that mindset with business acumen so that work on a structure or something that creates results for you by integrating your life and your business rather than just having that. So interesting point in terms of, the reason why I brought up clarity and self-awareness is really around that so that we can help a lot of the small businesses that come in here with their business. So Phil, I guess I wanted to touch on, do you have an example of a purpose really well done? So for small business, you're in the business, you're passionate about one particular product, but you don't really see the bigger purpose, or you don't see the purpose that drives, the real purpose that drives you, towards that product. So can you maybe identify, give us an example of a purpose really well done?
I'll give you an example of someone who's, created a really good new product with purpose. And I think the challenge is, as you alluded to, that we think about our personal why quite a lot, but our business why is a sort of different conversation. And in small business, it's much in the same. And if we can combine them, we get a much more powerful outcome for ourselves. And a great example is a lady who's a lawyer in Brisbane who's in family law and dealing with divorces quite a lot. And she realised that she was turning away 6 out of 10 people who came up to her practice as prospects because the average cost of a divorce on the family unit is $100,000 in legal fees. And a lot of people can't afford that, so they were going away. But she also knew that a lot of divorces are amicable. So she created an online-based system, and it's very intricate. It's not just push a button. There's a process to go through where people going through an amicable divorce can follow this system, and instead of costing $100,000, they get to the end point and it costs them less than $1,000. So not only has she created a new line of business for her, which being online, she can scale up across the whole of Australia. She's also fulfilling a purpose there, which is helping family units save money, particularly when there's kids involved and you're saving that family unit, say $99,000. That is a really significant positive outcome. So I just live to find examples like that and help businesses find them. The only catch is every business is slightly different. So you've got a same process, but you often get different outcomes.
Yeah, excellent. That's a fantastic example. Family divorce must be stressful enough as it is.
That's right.
Dr. Maria, you brought up good stress to me, so I'm going to lead to you. So why is some stress is good for you? I guess, let's put that into the context of what Phil said, because family law is quite stressful as a whole, let alone the touch points. So if you could give us a perspective around that.
Absolutely. Well, I look at stress in 3 ways. There's good stress, there's bad stress, and then there's ugly stress. And to take the family law example, $100,000 in family law fees, I'm going to say is probably ugly stress, right?
Stress, yeah.
So the beautiful lawyer up in Queensland has created an opportunity to create an opportunity for people to move through something that is not a great situation, but relatively in a calm way. When we're talking about good stress in general, though, is that I look at it from a small business point of view of it's where we've got urgency in our life that creates us deadlines. It means it actually helps us get stuff done. Some stress is actually good. It's actually how we grow. We can't grow in safe spaces, right? And when we're actually going through growth periods, when you went from, 30 bags to 756,000 biscuits a day? That's pretty phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
That's some serious good stress to work out how you scale to that level, right?
Exactly.
I'm still trying to figure out how I'd make 30 of them. But that's where I consider that to be good stress, where you've got some deadlines, you're working towards it, it puts pressure on you to get stuff done. If we don't have a deadline, most of us would still be procrastinating. When we so that puts us into a state of what I would consider to be alarm. When we're in that stage too long because we can't actually meet our deadlines, that's when we move into a resistant state, and it's where it can start showing physical signs and symptoms within our system that we're not adapting to that stress well anymore. And that's where we can start getting sick, which we don't want to be in that space, and we definitely don't want to get to the exhaustion state, because that's when chronic illness pops up for people. And let's face it, if you're chronically ill and what your business is depending on to be there to function, then that turns into that ugly side of stress. So the good stresses is when it's creating urgency and pressure to actually assist us to create momentum to get stuff done. And that's the perfect sweet spot to be sitting in most of the time.
Yeah, excellent. What a great insight, seriously. Given the fact that the pandemic last year, what a lot of businesses are going through, especially the hospitality sector, understanding this and really getting some information around this. It's funny, I'm reading a really good book at the moment as well by BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits it's called. Just turning small things into daily stress-less activities is a great way to get through these periods. So, Karen, I just want to touch on, in terms of resilience, I already mentioned that it's very hard for people to understand resilience, but what are some tips? I mean, I guess, what have you been through around that, and what are some tips that you can give businesses about being more resilient?
I think the biggest learning from the journey of Courage on Kitchen and my personal journey, EOB, is actually that we were very much like many small businesses. You're reactive. Something pops up. It's a little bit about the stress management. Something pops up. Oh, it's urgent. It's more. It needs to be done now because they think it needs to be done now. But if you can turn your thinking mindset from reactive to proactive, but you will always have reactive moments within that proactive thinking that you need to make decisions, but start thinking, and for me that starts about what's the vision, where do we want to end up? Even if the only thing you think today as a small business owner, we're sitting here in 12 months' time in February 2022, where do you want to be? What does your business want to look like? And I'd have to say to you, every year in our very early days, we'd get the A4 book out and I'd draw the quarters up, and then I'd down, sort of thing, we want to look at our team, our finance, our product, whatever it might be, and go, right, in this quarter, what do we want to do? Just little habits like that, which was an annual habit that we used the good old, when I started, believe me, technology was not around. It was a lot of thick books, that we actually did a lot of writing. Yeah. But that that's proactive thinking. There's bound to be a reactive moment come up in your life in the next 12 months, but you've got some sort of idea where you want to be in 12 months. So that's, definitely proactive thinking.
Excellent. So there's a question here. So for Karen, since you started in 1993, what was the biggest change in the food manufacturing industry, and how important are direct sales to consumers today?
Very interesting. So we started in 93, which there was nothing. There was no farmers markets, no, Google, no technology as we know it. So we just, there were other avenues by which we could go out and get our learnings and understand. In terms of our biggest changes, to tell you the truth, as we've grown and as we've grown a team, I think how many employment law changes have I seen come through? So understanding that, and that forms stress. Yeah. So we've needed to have a support network that makes sure, we understand that. In terms of manufacturing, I think keeping on top of technology. So we're actually up to the 7th upscaling in the 28 years. And that could be, we started here making this way, or our team looks like this. Every time, another good tip, of course, that's been talked about, is add your processes and systems as you go, and Dale talks about that completely. Yeah, that's what Dale does. He does. Processes and systems, whether you record them, we did record them, in a good old Word document to what can be done now and what apps are available, just to make your job easier and to reflect. And what's written is, can be changed, is done. Did I answer the entire question, or did I miss something in all of that?
Well, I was just going to say, you should be super proud, because everyone keeps saying how manufacturing is really tough in Australia. And for an Australian manufacturing company, I don't know much about manufacturing, but I know your products.
Thank you.
But I do know that it is a tough market to stick around with, given that overseas plays a big factor around that, so which is great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Sorry, there was a couple more questions, but I can't go through them. But thank you so much. We are run out of time. I hope you had an insightful panel discussion by Dr. Maria, Phil, Preston, and Karen. Thank you so much for joining us. What we'll do is we'll send out your links to everyone, and they'll get in touch with you. But please stick around. You can jump on chat and make sure you can have a chat to them as well.